All right, why don't we go ahead and get started, and hopefully we'll get a few more people that are joining us. This is the Mayor's Forum. There's no attendees, excuse me, we're all participants. So please just make sure that you're on mute. If you have a question, raise your hand as we go along. And again, it's an open forum, so sometimes you kind of see which direction it kind of takes us, and we'll go in that direction. Featured speaker tonight is Adam Wolf, who is our interim town manager. He also was our planning director. And I asked him to come tonight because we have a number of planning initiatives that are going to come either before town council or they're being worked on by the planning staff and planning team. And that covers everything from short-term rentals, which are also known as STRs, SB9, building code update. There's a couple of things on the housing element, parklets, and then design review. And this is all on top of all the work that planning department's already done with the housing element that was submitted to the state. So they have a lot of stuff going on. So that, let me go ahead and turn it over to Adam. And I'm sorry, one other thing. Some of these items I mentioned, some of them are all like actually dictated by the state of California. So it's one of these things where we don't have a big choice like XB9 that Adam will talk about. It's not like the town's going, let's go do this. It's more like the state is going, here's what you have to do. And that's versus like short-term rentals where we're going, hey, let's reach out to the community and see if we need to do something about short-term rentals and what direction we want to take it in. And same with the housing element, that also is something that's dictated by the state of California. So with that, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Adam.
Thank you, Fred, and hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. Yeah, and Fred, there certainly is a lot going on, planning related, building related, in terms of policy. And so wanted to sort of just give an update on where we are with a lot of those items, and a lot of public meetings coming up where members of our community can come and participate and provide their own feedback and comments on a lot of these upcoming policies. I'm still very much working as in my former role as well, especially on housing policy related items, as well as with the building code update and whatnot. And, it seems that every year we have more new housing legislation coming out of the state. So we'll be actually at this again next year because, for example, there's some changes to the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, accessory dwelling unit laws that were just passed that we're going to have to revisit next year. So that's a good point, Fred. A lot of this is sort of having to adapt our rules to what the state laws now say, and they seem to change every year. So with that, what I'd like to do is just start with what is happening immediately after this meeting at the Planning Commission tonight. And we are doing our second workshop with regards to short-term rental policy. There was the first workshop held in June earlier this year. There's been some questionnaires and attempts to attract public outreach. To attract comments from our community members about what sort of regulations, if any, we should be pursuing, whether we should be prohibiting short-term rentals. A lot of that information will be shared this evening with the Planning Commission and get their input. Bob Brown has been helping. He's our planning consultant on this and has been helping. I've been working with him on this policy and options related to that. So we're still very much in a policy development phase. It's a good time to sort of provide your own 2 cents and comments on that issue. Tonight, that will probably, Planning Commission starts at 7 o'clock tonight. So still not sure which item will go first. So, with respect to short-term rentals, we've been reviewing essentially what other cities have done, current trends and issues around short-term rentals, trying to get community preferences again, like I said. And so it's a very dynamic area because rules that were in place, some cities have adopted rules in the past. Those are now changing depending on need and seeing how those policies have played out elsewhere. I will say in Corte Madera, we've taken the position that because we haven't explicitly allowed short-term rentals in our zoning code, they are prohibited. We know they do exist, however, in Corte Madera. And to this point, we have enforced based on complaints, that we receive, which frankly have been not voluminous. There's been a couple of cases we are aware of, but we haven't seen this being a significant major problem in town at this point, like some other communities. All right, so then the other item on tonight's docket will be
Hey, Adam, quick
yeah.
question on the STR.
Short-term. Yep.
Thank you. So there's a workshop in June, there's one tonight. What's kind of like the timeline? Is it early next year that the Planning Commission is looking at having something kind of put together that'll go to the council, or is it just kind of?
I think what we're going to do is take the feedback we get tonight, along with what we've received from the last several months, and likely come to the future council meeting. And I do think at this time, given the variety of things that everyone's working on, will likely be early next year, January or so, where we will ask for direction from the council about whether this is a priority and whether we want to develop regulations based on what we've heard to this point from our community members and some of the staff's thinking on that at the moment. So I think that's the next step. If the direction is yes, move forward, we will then pursue some policy options to consider, basically, and a draft ordinance that would have to go then back to the Planning Commission and then back to the council. So this is the process to develop regulations and policy. It's not short, but I think there's a reason for that. It's that the longer it goes, the more time we have to sort of really thoughtfully consider these complicated issues. Patty, do you mind, Fred, or are you raising your hand?
I just thought it sounds like if it ain't broke, don't fix it. That if you're not getting complaints, maybe just let it ride as it is.
Well, and that's basically the last time we went to the town council, that was the direction we were essentially given, was like, let's see how it goes for a while. Let's see if this becomes an issue. In the last work plan, it was sort of this was several years ago, maybe 2018 or so. And so during the discussion of the last work plan with the town council, it was sort of let's check in, let's see where we are now and see if this is something we need to really focus on. And so that's what we've been trying to do as staff, is get out there and see what sort of response we have. So anyways, that comment, I could take that comment tonight, or you're welcome to come as well and let the commission know that that nice comment there, that good comment. All right, the other item, which is an very important item as well, but one that is really being driven by state legislation, which we responded to back in January of this year. The town adopted an urgency ordinance, basically installing some temporary regulations regarding Senate Bill 9 and what that allowed in all cities throughout the state, which was allowed property owners in single-family home districts to split their lots and to then build potentially up to 2 units on each of those lots. So taking a single family parcel, which today, frankly, you can have 2 units with an accessory dwelling unit, but allowing more flexibility. And the big move is allowing individuals to split those parcels really in 2 and create new lots out of what was previously generally only allowed to have 1 home on it, or one lot with one house and accessory dwelling unit. So that were temporary regulations were put in place. We've seen about, I think, 8 or 9 applications from Corte Madera residents. To this point, applications to split their lots. We've seen one actually go all the way through that process to actually record a new lot. in town, or I think it's at the county for recordation at this point. And now it's time to really put in place the permanent. Those temporary urgency regulations don't last forever. You have to really convert those into permanent ordinances and regulations, policies. So tonight we'll be proposing those permanent regulations for the Planning Commission to consider. They're very similar to what was in the urgency ordinance, except there's some tweaks to it. And that will be for the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the Town Council for adoption. So we're here at the Planning Commission this evening. It could go to the Town Council. The plan right now is for it to go to the Town Council for adoption on November 15th. So the middle of next month. So just be aware of that one.
Hey, Adam, quick,
Yeah.
just a bit of background. The application process to split a lot, is that just it's an over-the-counter type thing? So there's no notice to neighbors. It doesn't go through the Planning Commission, correct? Or anything like that?
Well, so a couple of different questions in there, and on the very good point. Yes, it's ministerial, meaning that there's no public hearings or public meetings before the town approves the project. And staff does that. It's so, yeah, quote unquote, over the counter. Staff will review the applications, make sure that they comply with the regulations, and then it's approved. We do in our rules, in our temporary rules that we've had, or under the urgency ordinance, and going forward, our permanent rules do have noticing requirements. So even though there's not really a sort of discretion about approving or not, we did feel it was important, and council also felt it was important to make sure that notice does go out to residents around a property that is proposing to split their lots, so that at least they have that information.
Okay, and then part two, I'm sorry, Susie, one more quick one and I'll get you in. And then part two of that is, if I go to build, so I do my lot split and now I want to build on it 2 units, does that go through the Planning Commission?
No.
Okay.
Not if they follow the rules, again, by which we're discussing this evening. And the state has requires you to at least allow for certain size unit duplexes, essentially, under that law. And it's all by right. Again, we would do notice, but if it meets the standards and requirements of the state, and that we've implemented through our own ordinance, then it would just be the staff approving it, and construction. The next step after that would be building permits could be issued. Yeah.
All right, thanks. Susie, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So that is so weird to me. So I could split my lot, not tell my neighbors, and even sell that other lot?
Yes.
Or build on it without really telling my neighbors or anybody about it.
Well,
That's so weird.
You could do it. Town does have the requirement that we would notify your neighbors for you, but yes.
Good. And you do, and you would, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's something that would happen automatically.
Yes.
Yeah. I guess, well, I'm planning on being there to listen to that tonight because I think it's very
Good.
interesting, but I don't know much about it, but it seems very.
Yeah, we've seen about.
We don't
yeah.
like over government, but also we don't want, wow, weird.
Hey, Adam, isn't there a deed restriction though, that if you split your lot and you build 2 units, you have to live in the primary, or is that if you're living on the property? Or am I wrong on that?
I would.
It's overly complicated.
Yeah, that will be in it tonight. I mean, I would just recommend coming tonight and listening. I don't want to, there's a lot more detail. Martha's all over this. So I think there's a very fuzzy law that says that though you have to have the intent to live in one of the units, and that's what's you have to record. So it's not, it hasn't been tested in the courts what that means. So anyways, that's SB 9 on that policy that we're working on right now, and tonight we'll be in front of the Planning Commission. Another very important building code is the building code update that will be introduced by the town council November 1st. So next Tuesday. This is something that every 3 years the building code is updated by, again, state. California building code is a 3-year cycle. It's updated every 3 years, and then every city essentially will adopt the update to the California building code locally in our regulations. And those are just the basic standards under which construction occurs, and must, the standards of construction are codified in that building code. One thing you should know about what staff is proposing this time, which we haven't done in Corte Madera in the past, is to go above and beyond the basic California building code standards, which are already pretty energy efficient, but to align with our other Marin County jurisdictions in doing what are called sort of above and beyond, are called these reach codes, and specifically with respect to electrification, we would be proposing to require all new buildings, so new homes, new structures, commercial structures, would be required to be all electric, and not have any natural gas hookups. And so that is a new piece. We talked about this with the council with respect to a grand jury report earlier this year, but this is actually when on next Tuesday we're drafting the ordinances, and that will be in the Fred, your packet this weekend to look at the ordinance related to this item, and we're calling it sort of like an all electrification ordinance applying to new buildings and new structures.
And that includes multifamily apartment buildings.
It includes all new buildings, yeah, in town. The California Building Code is sort of moving this direction over the years, but this is beyond what the current baseline California Building Code would require. The other area that we are proposing to go further than the building code, or the California Building Code, would be around electric vehicle charging stations, and the requirement for to go beyond what the California Building Code would require in terms of the number of spaces in for example, in a commercial development, you'd be required to construct or the number of EV charging station ready spaces that you'd be required to construct on a given property. And so that's that broad outlines. Again, there'll be much more information about this in the staff report coming out this weekend. But certainly that's an important ordinance to follow. And I will say this will be the topic of conversation as well at our Climate Action Committee, which is having a meeting tomorrow at 4:30 p.m., which can be attended by in person. And I believe, let me just make sure that's in Zoom. So our Climate Action Committee, for those who don't know, I think the first meeting of that committee was July. It was a committee that was formed just this year with, I think we had 7 committee members. I think we're at 6 at this point. 1 withdrew their appointment. And so there's 6 members, and really this is the first big issue that they have really tackled head on. And Bob Brown, who I mentioned earlier, has been our staff support help with that committee, but I'm happy to announce we also now have just hired, and our offer was accepted, a new staff person who will be one of their roles will be to staff that committee as well. And so we're very excited to welcome her to our town staff and to she'll be a much very visible member of our staff working on climate action and also adaptation policies with the town and that committee and specifically. But again, if the committee, Climate Action Committee, if you want to see them at work, they will be having a meeting tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. It is also via Zoom as well. You can attend that meeting.
And hey, Adam, the new
Yes.
person that you just hired, she also will be interacting with other departments, right? Like DPW, planning.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I think,
also. So
you
it's
know,
across multiple business lines.
so for example, the building code's a great example. So while the Climate Action Committee may be discussing the building codes and is discussing the building codes, so that requires member of staff who's working with that committee to also work with our town's building official and building department and the planning and building director in sort of bringing staff's perspective and recommendations to that committee, and then ultimately also to the town council.
Go ahead, Patty.
Question about the building code is, you said that's every 3 years, I believe. And is that the reason that it wouldn't be until 2025 to look at visitability?
No, I think there's always opportunities to amend codes separate and apart from the regular update. You just are required to update your building code every 3 years.
But changes can be made in the interim.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you.
For example, last year we amended our building code to incorporate new administrative citation penalties, for example. And so that was added to the code. So certainly could, other amendments are possible within the 3-year cycle as needed.
Thank you.
All right. I think we hit on that one. So that's November 1st at the town council, and then November 15th would be the adoption of that. Those regulations kick in typically January 1st of the following, basically after these are called the 2022 codes. So they actually kick in January 1st, 2023. So it's a little confusing, but that's when those would kick in. What else? Housing element, of course. Can't provide updates without talking about the housing element. There are a couple meetings coming up that we're sort of getting now down to, we've talked about the direction we're going in terms of identifying sites for where the town would accommodate additional and new housing in town. Now we're sort of in the nuts and bolts of actually implementing that, and how do we go about changing our codes to allow for that to happen. And so part of that is the environmental analysis piece of that work. And so on Thursday of this week at 6:30 p.m., we're going to be receiving public comment on the subsequent environmental impact report that was prepared to analyze the environmental impacts of this potential new housing, I should say, to analyze the potential environmental impacts of the proposed new housing development that would occur on the 11 sites that we've talked about, which is about 885 units of new housing over the next decade, approximately. So, that's another opportunity for public to comment there. The actual closing of the comment period for that environmental impact report is November 21st. In the meantime, we're going to actually have a workshop with the Planning Commission on November 9th, where we will outline sort of the framework for the rezoning proposals, where we'd actually start to talk about rezoning these 11 properties that we've talked about to this point to higher densities, allowing more units, and sort of putting in place development standards, heights, setbacks, things like that would a developer would have to comply with some caveats, but would sort of where they would start their project in terms of actually trying to put that development at the density proposed on each of these 11 sites. And so it starts to get what it looks like, what are the requirements for development, and so on. And that will be a workshop with our Planning Commission on November 9th to discuss that aspect of the housing element. Again, this is getting down into implementation phase and the nuts and bolts of actually what it takes to actually move the draft housing element at this point forward. The draft housing element is at HCD for review right now, and their comments back to the town is November 21st, and those are due back November 21st as well. Once we get those, sort of everything is sort of like now aligning, and we'll be bringing a lot of this to the Planning Commission for recommendation for adoption on December, I think it's December 13th. And then the town council gets to review the rezoning proposals, the CEQA document for approval in January of 2023. The housing element, just a little bit of a quirk of in terms of timing, the actual adoption of the document, the 500-page document, actually lags behind the rezoning proposals to a certain extent, and we're able to adopt it. We have until May of 2023 to adopt it, but we'll likely, it's more like spring, we're thinking March, April, where adoption would occur. So that's a big aspect of planning staff's work as well. I will say, all right, no, we'll move on to parklets.
Hey, Adam, quick question on the housing element. Do you know any towns or cities in Marin that have submitted theirs and got theirs back, or have you heard anything about feedback?
The county of Marin, yeah, so there's sort of the Association of Bay Area Governments, and they're providing letters out, disseminating letters, comment letters that cities have gotten back. Only one Bay Area city has gotten approval from HCD, that's Alameda. I think 16, or I think there were maybe 18 cities have gotten their comments letters back, and one, like I said, Alameda has been approved. The county of Marin just got their comment letter back last week. So a lot of the comments are regarding the sites, and whether or not the sites have enough evidence has been provided whereby the sites that have been chosen are likely to be developed in the next 8 years. For some other cities, there's been comments about how more specificity around affirmatively furthering fair housing and how cities are actually going to meaningfully address that aspect of housing element requirement and law. And I will say the county did not get a tremendous amount on that, and we used the same consultant in preparing our housing element and affirmatively furthering fair housing, addressing those policies around affirmatively furthering fair housing, and increasing sort of the options and opportunities for housing to individuals who have more historically been excluded from housing opportunities in places like Corte Madera and Marin County. So we feel like we're probably on a good track there. And that's most of the comments. So we'll just, sort of have to wait and see a little bit. Some of it is sort of seems awkward, but kind of depends a little bit on who's reviewing, from HCD, your particular document.
Yeah, and one thing, kudos to staff, both Adam and Martha. They did a ton of community engagement. I think it was like a 9-month process to actually get the 500-page document together. But they, I know they were at farmers markets, I don't know how many times, the Zoom calls, their surveys. I think the other key thing that they did is they actually reached out to the people that own the properties to see if they were interested in potentially developing those. There was a great article in the Chronicle a couple of days ago, and some of these towns and cities, they weren't in Marin. I think most of them were either in the South Bay or in the East Bay. But like one sat there saying, "Oh, here's a grocery store that we're going to be able to develop on," and the grocery owner sat there saying, I just put like $1 million of improvements in. There's no way I'm going to be building on my property. Another one sat there saying, oh, they're going to like partner with the college and build housing there. And it was the same type thing where the college sat there saying, you know, we've had talks with them, but that's all we're having is talks. We really don't have any plans. Another one I think was building over a creek somewhere. So again, kudos to our staff because they're not pie in the sky. Like, let's just go pick something and see if it sticks. It's more like, let's drill down, talk to the property owners, talk to the communities and see what's reasonable. And I think that's all going to bode well, knock on wood, when we get it back from the state with the comments. So again, I just think you guys did a great job on it.
Thanks, Fred. Yeah, yes, yeah, feel good about certainly the interactions with the developer, with the property owners that we've had. And as you know, we've had some property owners actually submit letters wanting to be part of our process. So parklets.
I've been waiting for this for the last time.
Yeah, parklets. So this is certainly a priority issue for staff as well. And I think it came up at one of our public meetings in the past through public comment. And we have currently a COVID-related emergency, I would say urgency ordinance, which actually allowed the parklets and I would say some outdoor activities that typically would not be allowed, such as gyms using outdoor spaces around their facilities well, essentially those urgency ordinances allow those activities to happen. And so that urgency ordinance is coming due to expire at the end of the year. As we did last year, we're going to revisit that in November. So November 15th, we'll be coming to the town council to revisit that and propose to extend the urgency ordinance for we'll see, but for some time again, while we come up with the permanent regulations for parklets in particular. And we'll also be asking the council for some direction around what the outlines of that ordinance may look like. We've been accumulating and researching a lot what other Marin County jurisdictions have been doing, Larkspur and San Anselmo, the county, San Rafael, so on, and other places. And so I think actually it's just taken some time for actually, I feel like we're in a better position to actually have that information and see what other cities have been doing in order to actually start to put together what our program and ordinance may look like for parklets. And so what we plan to do at that meeting November 15th is document and discuss the research and show what other cities have done, and then look for some direction from the council on more of a framework for how we would move forward with a permanent ordinance related to parklets and potentially some gymnasium activity. Yes, Patty.
Patty, go ahead.
How many are we talking about in Corte Madera that exist now?
Well, there's 3. So there's currently, and they're all currently in what is in our zoning code is referred to as Old Corte Madera Square. So, you know, and frankly, even though it was open initially to anybody in town who wanted it. So I think that's actually an interesting first observation, and probably something we would, if we went with permanent ordinances in this regard, we would sort of limit it. I think staff, at least at this point, would propose to limit it to that area moving forward, because that's where we've seen people to actually taking advantage of those temporary regulations to allow it. So, you know, yeah, there's 3 restaurants that are currently taking advantage of that. I will say there are several, I would say several of our gyms are also using the regulations, current temporary regulations and urgency regulations to conduct some of their business outside. And it's been a success for their people who are working out, wanting to not be in a confined space and be outside. However, you know, we would ask the council as well for some direction on whether we should move forward with an ordinance that would allow gymnasiums to, if properly designed, again, also sort of to allow outdoor activities and gymnasium activities, which is currently not allowed by our zoning ordinance. But certainly that would have to be done with regulations around appropriate design as well. So
Adam, is
yeah.
Lighthouse and the one next door, which is now one parklet,
Birmingham.
is that
Yep.
considered two? Because it's one parklet.
Well, they both, yeah, they are doing a shared parklet, we're calling it. And certainly sort of works for them because their hours are a little bit, one's more of an evening
Morning and
destination
one's
and one's
evening.
more of a morning destination. So that works for them now, and perhaps they could, in terms of the rule, one of the big things we're going to be discussing is sort of the size of parklets. And so you'll see how other cities have handled the size of a parklet, and it's particularly related to the frontage of the business or a certain maximum number of parking spaces permitted to actually utilize. So anyways, those are the things that we'll be bringing forth on November 15th for council consideration and direction.
So, hey, Adam, just to summarize, it sounds like it goes to town council on the 15th of November. Then in a perfect world, that would get approved to extend the urgency ordinance, which means businesses can still keep their parklets open X amount of months. And then it gives staff time to figure out more of a permanent solution. And if we did come up with a permanent solution, there'd be overlap. So it's not like, oh, guess what? Sorry, you have to stop today and start the process tomorrow. There'd be overlap. So there'd be continuation there for parklets, right?
Yeah, well, there'd be some predictability. I think it wouldn't necessarily be allowing what's currently out there today to be just stay. And so whatever physical modifications might need to be made, there may not be overlap during that period. You'd have to obviously discontinue one to build the next, but it at least be predictable for restaurant owners and the property owners who want to take advantage of it. There'd be more predictability. Yeah.
Because I think they're great, especially in Old Town Square. I just think there's a social aspect to it. And I just think people really appreciate them.
Yeah.
My 2 cents.
And the other thing that I just wanted to highlight, well, there's two more, but one on the planning side. Also, we've had a couple of meetings with the Planning Commission recently regarding design review regulations. And I think this is sort of it's very much in the weeds, and it's very nuanced in getting into our regulations and when design review is required, and some making sure that we feel as staff, for a long time we've wanted to make the requirements for design review much clearer, because it's not easy for people reading it to really understand how it works. So we're going to try to do that, but there are also some potential changes to the design review. And for those who don't know, design review is essentially triggered for certain types of projects. And once you're into design review, it's a planning permit that's required, and there's some discretion over either staff or the Planning Commission. It would actually have to approve it based on written findings, and some of those involve privacy and views and things like that. So it starts to become very important. Those thresholds become important, which projects actually are required to obtain those permits, and then also just obviously the findings around design review, and also the making sure it's clear what the rules actually are. And so we've had a couple of meetings with the Planning Commission. We're going to continue to have some meetings on design review. So if you are interested in that, I just recommend you reach out and make sure you're sort of informed about either through our website. We've been putting out sort of notices through that, but making sure you're informed about when the next meetings are with respect to that policy issue. The other one, I'm just going to plug more of a Public Works Park and Rec item for. I want to say it's actually tomorrow night. There's going to be a more interactive, where come down to the community center And if you want to have really input on location and some of the criteria around where to locate a new bathroom facility for Town Park, tomorrow night's a great opportunity to do that. And that will be at 6:30 at the community center. And the purpose of it's not going to be on Zoom because really trying to get people down there to physically go out, and part of the meeting will be about physically going out and looking at the sites or different locations in Town Park itself, which I think will be a great opportunity to sort of see it and visualize it. And then also talk about some of the amenities potentially with that bathroom. There will be a follow-up workshop as well, another opportunity to weigh in with, I think, at a future Park and Rec meeting, which has not, commission meeting, as I say, that hasn't yet been scheduled. So in any case, a lot going on. I will
Hey, Adam,
stop it there. Yeah.
I'm sorry, real quick. So people, and what Pat has a hand raised. So, but people have an opportunity either to go, I want to say physically in person tomorrow, 6:30 community center, to actually go check out the sites, or at some point of time in the near future, Park and Rec Commission will have it on their agenda. So people can also voice public comment through that, right? And if I can
Absolutely, yeah.
and I think out on our website, they actually posted potential locations, if I can remember. Pat, go ahead.
Hi, I just wanted to say everyone should check, but I think the start time of that meeting is 5:30.
Oh,
I think,
let me
Ashley's
see.
planning on walking everybody around to actually see the locations and wanted to do it during daylight. So for that reason, it's starting early.
Let me check. It is, you know what? Thank you so much. I would have messed that up. That's 5:30 p.m.
All right.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it. That.
You're welcome.
Adam, what else you got going on in planning?
That's enough. That's enough. No, it's and I just have to really commend our team that's working very hard. I think we've anticipated, we saw sort of the stars aligning, and this fall was going to be a very ambitious schedule, but nonetheless, a lot of these things are things we have to get done just based on certain statutory requirements and so on. And so some of us have been gearing up for this with taking some vacations during the fall month earlier this last couple of months, but yeah, it is a very ambitious and going to be a lot of work the next couple of months just on the planning and building side of things. So,
hey, Pat, do you have a question? You still have your hand raised?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay, thanks.
All right, thanks.
Adam, besides all this stuff in planning, is there anything else we're looking forward to 2023 or 2024? I'm getting a couple of years ahead of myself with planning.
Well, yeah, there's always fun stuff to talk about in the planning world. So absolutely, I think I know from wearing both hats of planning director, but also town manager, and having now a staff person really dedicated to climate action, but also on an adaptation side. I think that's going to help really start to help I know myself and RJ think about adaptation planning and really start to work on the adaptation assessment and implementing and even just prioritizing some of the different types of projects we have in our heads and get them down in terms of a work plan moving forward. And a lot of that is
Can I leave Adam on?
What's that? Yeah. So certainly climate, adaptation planning and pulling off of the work there that involves both issues related to sea level rise and hillside and undergrounding efforts, which are ongoing. And I think we are going to get some applications for fairly decent sized housing development. We've been talking to this is now, I think there are applicants out there who are, and their property owners who are seeking to actually implement some of the work we're doing. So what we should expect to see new development moving forward on some of these sites. It's going to be, I think, still more gradual than sort of the state's plan of getting this all done in 8 years. But nonetheless, that's something that's important, obviously, to anticipate, and just to make sure that our community realizes that this isn't just something on paper, that it's actually going, I think, we're going to see some physical development and changes in our community as a result, but all in the framework of the policy goals that we've outlined and the reasons why it's an important goal to have for our community. So
with that, let me go ahead and open it up. If anybody has any questions, and I'm going to hit Adam up with a few questions. Update on town hall. Cement's been poured, foundation, not yet.
Yeah, for those who are by there, and I would, it's a very busy construction site at the moment with a lot of foundation work being done, cement trucks out there, a lot of special inspectors, a lot of construction workers. So yeah, that, that may not be a planning related thing. That's certainly a building related item that is going to be probably the most important thing we do in the next year as a town, is making sure that project is delivering on all the hopes and all the work that we've done as a community and as a town to this point. So very excited to see that just develop into a building. That's sort of the most gratifying piece in a lot of ways of the work that you do in the planning world, is to actually see those plans start to take shape and physically start to take shape. And so that's what we're seeing there. And yeah, that's a good one for it. Can't forget that that's happening over there. So I'll be spending a lot of time over there, and I know our public works team is working very hard day in and day out, sort of making sure that that's project is going smoothly. So
Patty, you had a question.
I think I asked it before, but in the last go round, how many of the identified sites got built?
All of the sites, should I say, all with the exception of the one that was the little skinny one on the Sandra Market Trail, but all of the other sites really were developed as sort of outlined in our housing element last time. Obviously,
Wow.
there were only 4. I think there was Tam Ridge, which we know. There is the Enclave right next on Casa Buena, the Robin Drive project, which is under construction right now. And frankly, with those, I'm not forgetting, with those 3 sites and the addition of the accessory dwelling units, which are more than we anticipated, that more than satisfied the arena that we had and what we were anticipating. I will say also the Casa Buena, the Home Key project as well, which we are including actually in both our last housing element, but also in our future, in this go round as well, in our housing element, just again, due to some technical sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, just the way the state laws are written, it's mind-boggling, but it's a numbers game, so we're doing that. But anyways, that wasn't one that we weren't necessarily anticipating, but it obviously helped allow us to meet the very low income housing goals that we had for the last housing element.
And this, you said there's 8 sites?
Well, we've identified 11 sites. So one of the things that we're going to hear, I think that's more than enough based on, that's more than enough to meet our RENA requirements for the next housing element cycle. But there will be, we'll see what HCD says. We already know site 1. We've had some of the community members and neighbors of that property raise concerns about that site being used for housing development, although that was only going to be 10 units or so. Anyways, so the list may get pared down when we come to the planning commission and or council with the final list of sites. But a big part of that, we wanted to wait to hear what HCD, the state, said after reviewing and if they had concerns about some of our sites or not.
Thank you.
Any update on Best Western?
Yeah, no, I think that's a major project as well for the town, certainly. And we've been in communication with them. Our understanding is they're still finalizing their building permit application. So we have not received an application submittal yet from them, but our understanding is we should be receiving one relatively shortly. So I don't have a sense of exactly the timeline that means for timeline for construction on that site, or for sort of stopping current operations on that site, but that's certainly still in the works, and I would expect sometime next year that would be more of a reality in terms of actually transitioning from the current operations there into construction.
Okay. And then what about any update on PG&E with their transmission gas line that they're looking at replacing?
Yeah, I don't have any details. It's obviously not happening this year. Originally, I think it was planned for this year, but that's clearly not happening. So, I think I can't even imagine what their overall project schedule, work plan looks like. So it's sort of in the they're recalculating, put it that way, I guess, and we'll get some update from them, I would imagine, in the next 6 months or so about a new schedule for that project.
6 months to a year.
Well, hopefully we get word. I'm meeting with Mark. I'll ask him. I think I have a meeting with him tomorrow. I'll ask him tomorrow. So maybe I'll have an update for you. Tomorrow for your next meeting, Fred.
There you go. Anybody have any other questions, comments?
Yes.
Go ahead, Marla.
Yes, they're mostly observations and requests for reaching out and asking for help. One of the things I've noticed is there's increased commercialization of private residences, both along Casa Buena and Meadow Sweet. And in particular, there's a home on Meadow Sweet that is being used by a tow company. There's usually 10 to 15 cars being parked there. They're now doing work there. I've looked at the zoning, and it appears that would not be in conformance with the residential zoning. I'd like to know to whom I should address those concerns.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty sure I know the property you're talking about, Marla, and it's been a long running code enforcement case that I think our team's already aware of, but certainly can address those concerns to Mike Moriarty as our code enforcement manager and official, and or Adam Wiley as our code enforcement officer. But
there were 18 cars parked there weekend before last, and beer party, and I mean it was kind of insane. I don't live close to them, but if I were an adjacent neighbor, I would not be happy about that. I just have to drive by it. So I will reach out to Mike. A second observation is there's so many changes going on in this town. Is it possible that we can wait to make some of these major decisions until the new town council is seated and has some time to come up to speed? We're losing, our most senior person on the council. We may have a re-elect of an existing one and maybe 2 new potential people coming in. And it would seem to me that they should be the ones that would make the decision rather than the current council. So it's just a concern, and it's just a suggestion and a recommendation that we give consideration to that. And then the third, and I've heard it a lot around town, so I'm going to be the person who puts the words to the paper. And that is, I don't know what's quite going on, and this is not pointed at anybody in particular, but we've sort of losing our small town character in terms of what's going on with our current election. You know, we're getting flyers, we're getting door hangers, we've got signs all over town, we've got this and that going on. I thought we had an agreement that nobody could expend more than $5,000 on this campaign. And somebody who's been in marketing for a very long time, I can say that I think we've exceeded that in a couple of cases. I don't know if there's any check and balance to this. It just feels like we're running a national campaign in a community that has 12,000 people. And it's just an observation, and it's a concern.
Thanks, Marla.
Yeah, thanks,
Just
Marla.
with respect to the one, I would say the only decision that we are, well, there's two that would be made but prior to seating the new town council are the permanent regulations for the SB 9, which is related to urgency ordinance, and then the building code update. Other than that, out of everything else that I mentioned, those would all certainly, and that is part of the consideration, I think. Obviously, there are some other state mandated deadlines for the other ones, but those will be, for example, with the housing element, but those will be discussed with the new town council members.
Thanks. Pat, go ahead. Thanks, Marla.
Hi there. I just want to say, as one of the candidates, that I did sign the pledge to stay under $5,000, and I will be staying under $5,000. I don't know about the other candidates. I did hear that Eli did not sign the pledge, but I'm not sure about that. But yeah, all we're doing is signs, and she, as she mentioned, the door hangers. So we appreciate being allowed to campaign in town. We wish there were more events where we could talk about issues and get together before the election, but we're doing the best we can to get out there and canvass, and appreciate consideration of the signs.
Thanks, Pat. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Does anybody have any other comments? Questions? No? Okay, well, thanks, Adam. We appreciate your time. We actually gave you half an hour so you can go eat dinner before the planning commission meeting. So again, we appreciate the
Thanks, and look forward. Yeah, hopefully you guys have your calendars marked for all the upcoming meetings and things that are going on in town, and get the word out to your friends and other colleagues through whatever other groups that you're involved in. So thanks for attending and listening to that spiel there.
I'm sorry, Patty, go ahead.
One more quick question for Adam. The hotel on Casa Buena, it seems like it's stuck. Is it going forward?
It is there. It's not a very, they're not in a rush for reasons I can't tell you. If I was building that, I would certainly want to get it done as quickly as possible. But, you know, it's just a part of it is, I think, does speak to sort of some of the labor shortages and people are on different projects and different work, and not having enough people to do all the work at the same time, I think, is part of the issue that we're seeing. So, but anyways,
No,
yeah,
it won't be in
forward.
2022.
Oh, it doesn't look like it. No, I would say they still have plenty of more work to do. They at least do have the framing up so that, but certainly there's a lot more work to be done to complete that. So it'll be 2023.
Thank you.
All right, and with that, thanks, Patty. We'll go ahead and conclude. So thanks, everybody. Have a great night. And again, Planning Commission meeting starts at 7, half an hour. Thanks.
Thanks.